This is the Al Franken Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Hey, everybody. Interesting pandemic we have, isn't it? That's not what this one's about. We actually have a fabulous one today, for a change. Andrew Zimmern is my guest. Andrew is a chef. He is an award-winning chef, but he's also an award-winning food personality. I didn't know there were awards for that, but he's won the James Beard Award. He got it for being a food personality. And I think he's won it two or three times. And he's a great food personality, he really is. And now he's got a documentary series on MSNBC called What's Eating America. And it's about food and, things like climate and immigration and health. Turns out that what you eat impacts your health. It's a really fascinating interview, again, for a change. But first, I want to turn to, I guess our health. Soon after Trump became president, I just kept saying to anyone who would listen, especially to my Republican colleagues in the Senate at that time, I say to them, one day Donald Trump as president is going to face a crisis, and that the most important asset that a president can bring to a crisis is his credibility. And as we face this unknowable, horrible pandemic, Trump has no credibility. He started lying on day one. He made his poor press secretary go out the first day and lie about the size of his crowd. Oh, man. How pathetic, really. And Sean Spicer did it. He just went out there and said, okay, that's my job, I guess. So easily provable lie, but Donald Trump couldn't stand the idea that Barack Obama had a larger crowd than him. And so they put out this thing called alternative facts, which is that we learned that day from Kellyanne Conway. And that's what we've been getting ever since. Alternative facts, what I used to call lies. I wrote a book in 2003 entitled Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them, A Fair and Balanced Look at the Right. And I titled that because I was writing about these liars. Before that, I wrote a book entitled Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot and Other Observations. Rush Limbaugh just got the Presidential Medal of Freedom, a distinction he shares with Cesar Chavez, Mother Teresa, and the crew of Apollo 13. Of course, Rush Limbaugh got the award because without Rush Limbaugh, there really would be no President Donald Trump. Anyway, we cannot trust a word this guy says, and everybody knows it. And you know what? Everybody was sort of fine with it in a way. They're going like, we know he lies. He lies so often that you can't keep track of them. There's no point in keeping track of them. If he comes up with a spectacular lie in his morning tweets, there's three more before the evening. They just wash over you. But then a crisis happens. And I thought it might be a war, but it's this. And I don't know the extent of this crisis. We don't. We really kind of don't. It's very frightening. It is very serious for all those are going to die. Some of you, I'm sure, have investments in the stock market and have taken a big hit. And if that is your retirement or something, that's bad. It's hard. It's affecting our economy, obviously. It's really going to affect people who are struggling, who have to work. Maybe their job isn't there anymore. What are they going to do? They're living at the margins as it is. What are they going to do with their kids? Their kids whose school might have closed. And that's where they counted on getting lunch and breakfast. A lot of people are looking at, including me, their net value going down. This is a time. It's easy for me to say, I guess, to be generous. This is a worldwide pandemic. This is a crisis. This is a time when we really have to do a gut check and, care about those who are really, really getting hit by this thing. Anyway, we've got Andrew Zimmern, and it's a great one. For a change.
You may not remember this, but the very first time that we ever did anything on TV, on radio, any media, was when your Lying Liars book came out.
Oh, okay. I don't remember this.
Many years ago.
Yeah.
The reason that I'm in television is thanks to a segment you and I did. In those days,
You're welcome.
Thank you. In those days, in local TV, I was working at. It wasn't even Fox.
Holy
then.
crap!
It was the Channel 9 O&O.
You don't mean that, but if you did,
no, I do mean that.
Okay, well, you owe me
some kind of residual. We'll work that out.
Amazing props. Okay,
yes.
Go
so,
ahead.
And we had a morning show, and you came on, and the conceit was you would be interviewed at 7:45, and then at the 8 o'clock hour, you would actually co-host, right? Mm-hmm. And so you did some segments, you tossed to weather, you were...
This is in Minneapolis for everybody.
This is 18, 17 years ago, however many years.
Sure.
And... I was the food features reporter, and it was a Friday, and every Friday I would be in studio doing a recipe. And I made my grandmother's Auflauf, which is like a Dutch baby pancake. It crawls up the sides, it's battered,
the Dutch
it's in a pan.
love their pancakes,
They do. They tossed to us, and you were my quote-unquote sous chef in the kitchen, and I introduced this dish, Auflauf, and I said that's German for get out, because the pancake literally climbs up out of the pan. And you proceeded to do the rest of the segment in made-up German.
Ja, natürlich.
Yes. Ja.
Ich habe 2 Jahre Deutsch in Hochschule gelernt.
Zweimal Apfelsaft, bitte.
Guten Morgen, Chef Andrew.
Guten Morgen, Al.
Ja, was haben wir hier?
Und Fürsten, the Pannenhatten?
Ja.
Mit the Batter?
Oh, ja, natürlich.
Mit the Butter?
Ah, the Butter.
Ah, ist gut, ja?
Ja, for you in German, Butter is butter.
And anyway, that clip, I used that. We had enough, I was able to cobble together enough seconds where I actually looked pretty decent too. And that was my reel that got me in the door at Travel Channel. And I'm convinced, amongst 3 or 4 other little pieces of my life, that without that piece of tape, I would not be sitting here today.
Have it?
Oh, yeah, we do. We have it on those giant, remember those giant cassettes they used to record everything?
Oh, yeah,
on,
like 3/4 inch.
Yeah. I still have it in the office. I think we put it onto disc. I'll send it to you. It was hysterical.
You're doing the show What's Eating America.
On MSNBC.
Wonderful, wonderful hour-long docs on these issues regarding food.
It's politics and civics and social justice issues seen through the lens of food. Sometimes it very directly, in the case of our climate change show, where we literally went to food people, farmers, chefs, etc., and show the impact that climate has on what they're doing, specifically on things we eat, whether it was apples, different species of fish, oysters coming out of Apalachicola Bay.
Now, did you do meat?
We did some.
Stayed away from meat.
No. We wanted to do.
Meat's an issue.
You know how it is when you have 42 minutes. We shoot for 8-9 days.
Sure.
We could have cut 3-hour-long segments on climate and food. And in the second, third, fourth seasons, and I hope we have many, many more years of doing this show, we're going to keep coming back to climate and food because it's such an all-encompassing issue. But we do addiction and healthcare.
And that was a very moving
thank you.
show. It really was.
Thank you.
You're a recovering drug addict.
Yes, and alcoholic.
And
very
alcoholic.
proudly. Yeah,
Okay.
28 years and a month and a week and a half today.
So do you go to NA and AA, or do you just...
Well, I found recovery in a 12-step program. And
you don't want to say it because...
well, here's the thing. I'm old-fashioned kind of,
anonymity.
book thumper, anonymity guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so people always say to me all the time,
Well, you know what? People know
Yes.
you're an addict.
yes, and an alcoholic. I'm very
That's way-
outspoken about it. I've been
Okay.
talking about it for 20
The
years.
horse left that barn.
What I always do is tell them that I am a regular attendee of a 12-step group. And
Fair
the
enough.
reason that I don't want to mention it specifically is none of us should ever be spokespeople for that group. It's worked for
That's right. That's
80
one of the
some odd
traditions.
years. Yes, and
one of the traditions.
people can put it together that I drank a lot
Okay.
and
I'm guessing
attend a
AA.
12-step
I'm
group.
guessing.
I
I'm
can neither
guessing.
confirm nor deny.
Okay. And
You're not wrong.
That's actually confirming.
Oh,
I
is
hate
it?
to tell you that.
Oh my gosh, you got me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. One of the things that's loosened up for me over the
Yeah.
years is that, I used to think that the only way someone could get sober is the way that I got sober because that was my experience. And I now look at it completely differently. If someone sits on the top of a hill and has a white light spiritual experience, and then because they do yoga and become a parent, it changes their life and they never go back to the gutter again.
Oh, the gutter.
Fantastic. Because, the problem isn't the substance, as you well know. I'm not concerned today that I'm going to pick up a drink. I'm concerned that I'm going to be an asshole to someone. I'm concerned that
That's a huge concern of yours, I know.
Yes, and I'm going to. I don't. It's the behaviors and the other things associated with it. The alcohol and the drugs for me were a symptom of a bigger problem, and that's why I work so much on my emotional sobriety as well, and try to go away somewhere every year for 4 or 5 days and do some workshops and tune-ups and things, and just try to keep the ship pointed in the right direction.
Well, I go to a 12-step program,
Mm-hmm.
and if you went to this 12-step program, you would not have any idea what it's about.
that is as accurate and wonderful a description of all the 12-step programs that I've attended over the years as there is, because we're talking about the issues of our lives.
Right. And so I remember doing a 6-step is being ready to turn, fully ready, complete to turn your faults or defects
Yes.
over to God.
Our defects of character.
Yeah. And I was sitting in this meeting going like, if someone came in here, they would not know what this is.
Yeah.
They were just people talking about how I'm trying to get rid of this thing and how I hold on to this defect, which is...
It's the best I tell people all the time, the best meetings I go to are the ones where, booze or drugs are never mentioned, and the conversation is really about how we're living our lives today and what the best way is to stay right-sized and not break out into, a rash of egomania or self-centered behavior or any of the other things that are really destructive for people,
None of
or
which
resentment.
I do. All those, that's why the 6 steps are very hard for me. Because there's really nothing to give up.
But I think that's also why a lot of people and a lot of normies hear this is that
A lot of whaties?
normies, people who are
Normal.
Yeah, the normal folks.
Okay, there's no one who's normal, by the way.
That's the point of what I'm about to tell you is that I think everyone is well served by using these spiritual principles and practices from the Oxford group and from some 19th century religious groups that actually started to get into things like inventory. Very few people take the time to actually map out their lives and say to themselves, wow, this is what got me here. Here's what got me into trouble. Maybe I ought to avoid those 4 or 5 things on this list.
You've been through the 28-day or whatever it was. 33.
I was a little longer. I was very sick when I came in. So I had 5-6 days on the hospital unit at Ignatia. I had 33,
Detox.
34 days on the unit. And then I went down to Fellowship Club in St. Paul.
Which is the halfway house.
Correct. And they said to you, okay, you have to get a job right away. You have 5 working days to get a job. If you don't get a job within 5 days, you're out.
Okay.
And so I did the easiest thing I could. I walked into the
sold
director's office. I walked into the It's funny, some people do. I walked in the director's office.
Thing I know how to do. They said get a job.
Yeah, and that old skill set comes in so handy. I walked in the director's office, and I was so self-absorbed. I literally sat down and I said, look, I'm a culinarian from New York City, and I have this company, and this guy did this, I did that, and here's my QV, and I'm going to take over food service here at Fellowship Club. It's 60 people. I can handle it. I can do it cheaper than whatever you're paying to the food service company that's handling this. We're going to employ people in the home. I'm going to teach them skills. I had this whole plan. I said, and for the rock bottom price
a little grandiose
of whatever,
to
like
me.
$10,000 a week, I'll be able to do this for you. And he looked at me and he said, do you know where you're supposed to be right now? And I was like, trying to get a job. And he looked at me, he said, get your ass to group. And literally hit a number like the Queen in The Crown, and someone came in and escorted me out of his office. And he's my friend today, and I still joke. He still remembers that, which is pretty hysterical. I ended up I got a job washing dishes at a diner coffee shop on Snelling Avenue. I washed toilets in jails for a day. And then that really motivated me to get out and beat the pavement. And I got a job. I went to every little restaurant. I took the bus up to Snelling Avenue and just walked, and someone there hired me as a dishwasher. And so I washed dishes there and helped prep food for, 3-4 months.
This is Un Deux Trois?
No, this was before I went to Un Deux Trois. Then Un Deux Trois opened in...
Which, for the listener, means 1, 2, 3 in French.
Mais oui. Famous theater district bistro in New York for 40 years that opened an outpost in the Twin Cities in 92. And I went to Un Deux Trois. I heard Un Deux Trois was opening, and I knew the French owners, George and Gerard, from Sag Harbor and East Hampton days and from running around. So I had heard from friends. Hey, this restaurant is opening in the Fauché Tower. So I went down and I put in my application because I figured I'm going to go from a decent dishwashing job to a dishwashing job where I'm going to get an extra $1 or $2 an hour. And they hired me as a dishwasher right away. And I was there for about 2 weeks. And one day, one of the tenants called in sick.
The what?
He was the grill cook, but a fellow who worked the different stations in the restaurant.
I don't know
and,
the world.
Yeah, it's a fancy food term. I raised my hand. I went up to the chef and I said, I can work that guy's station. And he literally said, you're a dishwasher. Go back to washing dishes. And an hour later, they were panicking because the restaurant, as you remember back in those times, was extremely popular. We were doing hundreds and hundreds of covers at lunch. It would just fill up all at once. It was across the street from a couple of big ad agencies. It was like a big deal restaurant at the time in the Twin Cities. And they're having these panicking meetings right in front of me, because they don't want to talk in front of the cooks. So they come over near the dishwashing station. But every day for 2 weeks, I had looked down the line and I saw what this guy was making. And so I had memorized all the food after like 3 days. It wasn't very complex.
Now,
Simple bistro fare.
We should back up after you finish the story to what before you went to Minnesota, what
highly
your career
accomplished
was.
culinarian,
Yes.
all New York, Paris, Hong Kong, Italy, Michelin-starred restaurants, the whole 9 yards.
Yes.
I'm sitting there and I'm leaving finally with like 20 minutes before lunch service. And they're trying to cobble together like they're going to take this guy's like 10 dishes on his station and divide it up between other people. And I walked up to the owner and the chef. We're talking. I said, look, I've worked in a lot of restaurants. If you divide it up, it's not going to work. You're spreading out the pain. What you want to do is you want to localize the pain. And if the person needs help who's taking over that station, then people can chip in. That's why we have a team. That's why you have this many people in the kitchen. Don't spread out the misery, because then you're not going to be able to put out the fire if one starts. And the owner kind of looked at me and I said, I can cook this guy's station. I wouldn't tell you if I couldn't. And they're like, well, it's, the steak frite and the calf's liver with mustard sauce and the blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, I got it. Well, it's the salmon with ratatouille. I'm like, I got it. And his station had been prepped up all morning long by prep cooks and everyone like that. So the lunch bell rings and I go in and I put out the lunch from my station. After the service was over, the owner of the restaurant calls me into his office and sits me down and says, can you please explain to me why my dishwasher just put out better food than my chef does when he's working the station? And I'm like, well, I've got food experience and I've been cooking for 20 years.
Have you talked to the other dishwasher?
Because you think I'm good.
He's amazing.
He's amazing. And so he literally offered me a job right away. And I said, I can't. I'm living in a halfway house. I have to be back every day at 4 o'clock. I said, but I'm leaving here in 6 weeks, or I'm leaving the halfway house in 6 weeks, and we can talk then. And literally 6 weeks and a day later, I was hired as the chef in the restaurant, and within a month, I had replaced almost every cook there with people in recovery in the Twin Cities, because there's kind of an underground railroad from New York, L.A., San Francisco, Miami.
To Hazelden?
To Hazelden, and so many incredible culinarians. I mean, really accomplished people struggle with addiction and alcoholism, and they would come through, and I would hear from friends in the culinary world, hey, so-and-so's at Center City. I would go up on Sunday and visit them and say, look, if you stay, etc., I will hire you. And we put together, I mean, literally an all-star band. And for the 5, 6, 7 years, whatever, 6 years that I was the chef at Un Deux Trois, the reason we were the best restaurant in the Twin Cities, maybe in all of Minnesota, was because I had the best cooks, some of the best cooks in America cooking there. They were all in the first couple months of recovery, and we would have meetings in the back. It was the best food job I've ever had for that reason, because we were all really focused on recovery, and because of that, we were really focused on helping each other get through the day. And no one drank in the kitchen. There was less boorish behavior, something that's plagued our industry. There was a lot less of the sexism and the emotional denial. We were still guilty of a lot of it because we had a lot of old white guys in there, calling myself out most of all. But that's where I really started to learn to change my behavior, not just from a recovery standpoint, but when my partner, because I ended up becoming a partner in the restaurant, came to me and said, there's a line out the door of people trying to get in here to work with you because you're really talented. But I struggle every day with people who want to leave because of your vacillating behavior. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm working the principles of recovery outside of work, and I need to practice them inside of work. And it was actually that dissonance that led me to leave kitchens, because I didn't trust myself, and try to see what else I could do that would sync up more with the lifestyle that I was leading and trying to pursue in meetings and learning in the 12 steps. And so I got a part-time job working at a magazine, a TV station, and a radio station. I thought, okay, there's this food media world's about to explode. You could just see it. You could feel it in my industry. I said, I really need to learn the language of radio and television and writing. One thing led to another. Then I started getting more tape that I could push around, and then I sold the idea to Travel
Okay,
Channel.
I want to get to you did a show on addiction, and a lot of it was on the food industry and chefs.
Yes.
And I noticed, and obviously being a chef, and there's a lot of alcohol around it, and
yeah,
but I noticed that there are a lot of people, a lot of chefs addicted to drugs and alcohol and to tattoos.
Yeah,
I saw that and that. My God.
Yeah, we invented them.
I think you did.
Yeah, we if we didn't invent them, we sort of hold the record for most square inches of body covered. The problem with I think the perception of alcoholism is that you have to be adjacent to it. Anyone can go out and find the booze.
Yes,
you can bring it in anywhere. I mean, you want to get drunk in prison? It's easy. You want to get drunk in jail? It's easy. I mean, you can make your own booze on a desert island. But the fact of the matter is that it's the lifestyle, it's the pressure, it's the nod of approval that, I mean, when I was coming up, not only were we doing drugs on the line because it could fuel you on your 14-hour shift and get you to work harder, right? Stimulants and things like that.
Yep.
But then after work, you got a shift drink. Right, that was just part of the ritual of ending the workday. So you'd go out to the bar, you get your shift drink, But these were bartenders that you were working with and sending food to all day long. Because the bartenders in the middle of the night would be, I'm on a 10-minute break. Can I get something to eat? And you'd sneak them something. And knowing that later on that night, they'd sneak you a couple extra drinks. So the lifestyle it perpetuated the abuse, the sexism, the every bad part of our industry. The thing that I'm sort of proudest of with the restaurant industry is after many years, and rightfully so, of taking a ton of shit about what we've been doing wrong for 30 years, I can't think of another industry that's pivoted more quickly into wellness than the restaurant industry. We still have a long way to go. We have a lot of inequities to make right. But oh my gosh, is it being addressed, talked about, and changed every single day in our industry? It's really quite something. We have, alcoholism, drug addiction is twice the percentage in the hospitality industry as it is outside of it. Suicide is double the rate inside the restaurant industry than outside of it. And so it's something that we really needed to take a really good, long, hard look at.
Believe it or not, in show business, there's a lot of addiction.
Yeah, tons.
That I noticed.
Yeah, and for a lot of very similar reasons as well.
Yeah, the schedule, the pressure.
Yeah, and also it's a coping mechanism. Food is the number one antidepressant in the world, right? But and a lot of people, and that's why there's a lot of 12-step groups for that. We have 50% of Americans are overweight. I think it's like 37% are statistically obese. I mean, it's the healthcare situation.
You're going to do a show on the diet
on that aspect
that's coming up.
So yeah, we have a lot of room to go in there, but not everyone is a star in the food business or in show business. The struggle, the message that society gives you that it's not okay just to be in the middle and be average. If you haven't gotten your 15 minutes of fame or 45 minutes or 10 years or 20 years, then somehow you chose the wrong profession or you're somehow a failure, I think sends a lot of messages. We also like the restaurant industry. There are a lot of people who have been traumatized by situations within their lives growing up that gravitate towards certain businesses, right? Simply because they know that they want to join that same island of broken toys subconsciously because they know that they're going to find acceptance there.
Well, I have to say, probably the best well-adjusted person at Saturday Night Live. There were a lot of drugs
yes.
during
yes.
that first period.
Yes.
And
several alums from there have all come through Center City, some who are no longer with us, some who are.
Yeah, and we lost Belushi. That's when everyone realized, oh, I see. Yeah. This is really serious.
Yeah.
And we lost Farley, who tried and tried.
Yeah. Yeah.
He must have been to 10 rehab.
We lived in the same building in New York City for about 9 months. I ended up getting kicked out and wound up going homeless for my last year before I sobered up. And we'd see each other in the elevator at like 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and just give each other that nod, like, yeah, we're the two drunks in the building. And he didn't know who I was. I obviously knew who he was. Then, oh gosh, a year and 4 months later, he showed up in Minnesota. I mean, this is all well documented in a lot of places.
Yeah,
I'm not spreading any gossip.
But
he was, and so I got to know him as he was in a recovery period in his life, and
he was many times.
Glorious.
I wrote a piece for him, basically called "The Relapse Guy," and the thing was, the scene was Tim Meadows as a counselor at a rehab, and it's the exit speech with the family there.
Sure.
And they're saying, and he's saying this time he's got it.
Right.
And they're just completely skeptical, the family, because they've been through this before. And he gets a job as an organ courier. You cut to the surgical suite, and they're waiting for the liver. And,
fantastic.
And Chris shows up very late, very drunk, with a cooler, and he pulls out just some packaged calf's liver that he got from a grocery store. He lost the liver, and then collapses on the table. And he just kept, and we did one of those. He just kept saying, more relapse guy. And he was the sweetest guy.
Yeah, he was amazing.
And he tried and tried and tried.
Yeah.
And it's
And that's why we need it. I mean, and the point of our addiction episode that just aired the other week, and I'm sure is in reruns right now for people, and they can go to MSNBC.com and click on What's Eating America and can be directed to watching it online there. We try to stay in the solution for people because there's so many folks we lost. Yes, there's all the public people, but there are tens of thousands every month. We're losing so many people, especially with today's opioid crisis. I mean, booze is more available than it ever was before. Opioids, we went through that era. I mean, thankfully now, knock on wood, the drug dealers with lab coats on, the doctors who are just writing endless amounts of scripts, that's being policed a little better. But we still have such a problem because the drugs these days are so strong. The weed these days is so strong. The access to all of this is everywhere still. And the solutions
treatment
are not being taken advantage of. And because of the healthcare situation in this country, in terms of insurance, when I went to Hazelden 28 years ago, a significant portion of my cost of going to treatment was paid for by insurance that my friends and family were willing to keep paying behind my back for a couple of years. I was disappeared at this point. My mother thought I was dead. My father certainly thought I was dead. A lot of friends just thought I disappeared and hoped I wasn't dead, what people were willing to still call themselves my friends. And when I resurfaced, sure enough, Hazelden checked and I was still enrolled because they had been paying my COBRA or whatever, after I left my last job.
This is a policy that covered addiction.
That's exactly right.
Because, Paul Wellstone and Pete Domenici did the bill that passed long after Paul died.
Yep. I was very political as a young kid with my mother. We marched, I'm born in 61, so I went through all of those things in the 60s along with my parents. But when I moved to Minnesota and got a chance to get involved with a bunch of people like Jim Ramstad, like Paul Wellstone, all these folks, and sort of
let me explain a little bit about this. Jim Ramstad, a Republican.
Correct.
Liberal Republican,
yes.
and these days I don't think
great congressman
could be a Republican.
Yep.
He represented the 3rd District, which is suburban Minneapolis, and he worked on this. This is mental health parity and addiction and treatment parity, and Paul and Pete Domenici did it in the Senate, also bipartisan. This is a bipartisan issue. It should be.
It affects everyone.
But let me tell you that in the ACA, in the Affordable Care Act, there is mental health parity.
Yes.
And Trump has taken the suit by the state's attorneys general, which would make the ACA unconstitutional because they claim because the mandate's gone, it's unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court has taken it. That would get rid of parity.
Correct. And what's more, by the time everything got passed, and as it's been diluted in, or I call it getting kicked to death by rabbits, the teeth of that are really have a lot of it has been taken out. I mean, right on down to the fact that we no longer have in public school systems counselors to look at emotionally troubled kids. We wonder why we're having so much problem, why teen suicide rates have risen. The place that we can identify these things is by putting professionals in schools. And it's not just addiction, it's other harmful ways that children can develop horrific habits and things. A lot of studies have been done, and it is a little bit of a cliche to say so, but it is so true. It's like the health and wellness issue with food that we have coming up. You can either pay the doctor, which is more expensive, or you can pay the farmer and save money. We can't afford not to change how we eat, and it's the same thing with drugs and alcohol. We can't afford not to address this with mental health parity laws that get people into treatment, that get them into diversion programs that work, which we document in the show. These things work prison, instead of putting them in the system.
Have drug courts. I put in the reform of No Child Left Behind a mental health in schools piece. And I got that from Minnesota. Washburn, they have this thing where they teach every adult in the school, from the bus driver to the principal, from the lunch ladies to the teacher, kind of what it looks like when a kid may have a mental health issue.
That's right.
That's why you need professionals. Then they say to a professional, whether it's a social worker or a counselor or a psychologist or a therapist, some of them have therapists, and say, will you see this kid? and they interview the kid, and if they decide that the student needs treatment.
Yeah. What we're asking now, when you sort of look at what the current administration wants our teachers to do, they want them to be able to, do a module on 19th century American history, become a SWAT team member if someone invades the school, and then also become a psychologist if a child has a problem. And by the way, this is all at a time when we're paying them so little and stocking their classrooms with so little, they don't. We're interrupting their target run for magic markers. I mean, it is horrific how we have to start paying our teachers like they were doctors. I mean, that really is what it comes down to.
Oh, yeah, we have to
Mayor
do what
Pete's
Finland
line,
does.
but I love it. Yeah.
Well, it's there's a lot we have to do.
Yeah, there is.
And I think it starts with beating Donald Trump.
1,000%.
Now, I don't mean to be partisan here.
Before Trump came in, we were already behind the 8 ball, and he's made it so much worse, by exponentially worse, by gutting so many programs, I mean, look, we're living it right now with this coronavirus threat. People are listening to this podcast, a week, 10 days after we
thank
recorded.
God.
Thank God for Mike Pence.
And also the vaccine, evidently, I think it's on Trump's hunch.
Yes,
is going to be ready any day now.
Well, we probably won't need it because the president has also said
April.
this thing's going to go away by itself.
Yeah, when it warms up.
Yeah, exactly. It's
this
done.
Virus cannot survive spring.
That's exactly. Well, not spring in America. When people think about how many areas of their own lives, and this, goes back to some of the books that you wrote early on that such a big fan of, and stuff that sort of got me energized to really make sure that I was involved, and that I swore to myself, if I ever had a platform that was big enough, I had to use my voice in my circle to call out for the things that were right, because we have just chipped away at so many different areas of our lives that now the list of problems of sort of where you start, right, what the sequencing is, especially in the era of Trump, if we get to a post-Trump America, what's that going to look like? What do you start to, address first? Because the list is growing and growing and growing. And that's why the importance of this election in November is so crucial. And it's another reason when I'm asked why I wanted to do What's Eating America, I was trying to sell it for the last 3 or 4 years. And, I had gone to MSNBC.
You do voter suppression.
We do voter suppression. We tackle some really big issues. But look, even the addiction issue, which the first half of the addiction issue, we just document my story. And then we turn into some restaurant solutions and some things like that.
And you were a friggin' mess.
I was a mess. Thank you, my friend.
My God.
Yeah. I was a complete and total mess. I was a homeless, thief. I was a user of people and a taker of things. And I wanted to address addiction. We had 40 episodes we could have done as the first 5. We chose immigration and healthcare, climate change, addiction, and voter suppression for a whole variety of reasons, some of them institutional, just to the making of engineering television production, where we're going to be able to be.
The immigration one is so much about our food.
It's all about our food. Our food system stops if you take immigrants. Forget about taking illegal immigrants. I mean, over 50% of our workforce are immigrants. And I'm not talking about just farms. Everyone thinks we're talking about the United Farm Workers in California. Well, we're not. I mean, everywhere. Crab pickers, truckers, meat packers, people on ships pulling squid out of, the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Rhode Island. I mean, every single and of that group, 70% as much are illegal. We have huge number of jobs that are needed. Every single food producer of every kind we spoke to. I mean, this is in the many dozens. We're only able to profile 8 or 9 in the show. Every single person said to us, we need more workers. We have the ability to get more food out of the ground, and by the way, waste less. So feed more people, and we have 24% of America is hungry, and we're able to waste less, right? By not having to till under fields or not having to use machines when we could use hands and all the rest of that. We could actually be improving the food life for the disadvantaged in America, but we can't because we don't have enough workers. And by the way, all those people, south of our borders, outside of our borders, want to come in here and do those jobs. We document them. To a person, everyone says, yeah, I was able to spend my 3 kids to college.
Minnesota farmers, orchards.
Yeah.
they all rely.
Absolutely.
That's why they were for the immigration reform bill, both the Farm Bureau and the
That's right.
Farmers Union.
Well, now they're doing H-2B and A, as H-2B is a lottery system in some years, and the fourth generation crab company owner, lovely young lady who we profiled.
Yeah.
The crab that she has her pickers pick is the crab that's served at Trump Grill, because Jose Andres and I went undercover with our little phone cameras and documented that. We traced the crab back.
But he's very careful about hiring. Oh, wait a minute. No, he isn't.
Not. Yeah.
No.
Yes. Jose is very careful about it and is in full compliance in his 32 restaurants. Donald Trump, whether it's at his vineyard, his restaurants, his golf clubs, everywhere. I mean, we had Jesus Lira, the chef from the country club that he has in Westchester, on telling us about how the Trump organization were actually the ones that helped him get the papers that he needed to stay in that job. And then ultimately, when the president had to do more extensive background checks because of the pressure on him, they summarily fired him. And we were able to sequester him and shoot an interview with him that is one of my favorite parts of that episode. But without immigrants of all kinds, our food system falls apart. And this crab company owner, details how
it's a family business.
Yes, been there for 4 generations. She says, we have 108 people live in this town. I need 114 over the course of a summer. If I employed the 3-year-old babies and the 80-year-old grandmas in this town, I still couldn't get everything picked, and the government's only giving me 50 some odd workers. So I have people working around the clock. We're paying them extra money, blah, 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 overtime, all this other stuff. And we're paying for it. That adds an extra, 50 cents a pound onto the cost of crab. We are shooting ourselves in the foot. I mean, forget about all the other, the moral imperatives. Just from an economic standpoint, Jose says it so well in the immigration episode. He had a little bit of hope when Trump came in because he thought, well, this guy is a businessman. So there may be some pragmatism on his part that we actually need these folks since he does employ them, and we couldn't have been more wrong. And he is
the
demonized and
pragmatism
vilified
was
those
a
people.
different kind of pragmatism, which is his base.
Yes,
he appeals to their
Correct.
xenophobia.
Yeah, yes,
so that's his practical.
Correct. And we've learned that, and yet another reason we need him to. We're not going to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish as a country here. And the reference I was making to lying liars is
lies and lying liars who tell them a fair and balanced look at the right.
That is correct. The thing that I pull out of there is, we look at how many people are. We just look at the West Virginian coal miners. I mean, we're going to go down there, I think, in season 2. I love West Virginia. I fell in love with West Virginia. I've looked at land in West Virginia. I just am so in love with that state and its people for so many reasons. And, over the course of the campaign, when you have someone who comes in there and says, we're going to make sure coal stays. I mean, what a false bill of goods to try to win a couple of electoral college points. It is the worst kind of lying to people who really believe the folks that come into their small little town. There's no cities in West Virginia. The capital city is a town. There's not a high-rise building in that state. You have people who, in that state who still hunt in the evening for their breakfast and hunt in the morning for their dinner. You have hardest working, most beautiful folks who believe that people come into their towns and tell them the truth. And I felt like I was so angry for lying to you. You want to try to lie to people like you and me, Al? That's fine. Good luck getting away. We're cynical to a fault. But to go in there to these incredible folks and sell them a false bill of goods,
I would take issue with that.
Well, you can go ahead. Feel free. But it's
keep going.
Yeah, it's an abomination. And so that's one of the Here's the deal. These are really serious times. I felt like, do I want to go on making a certain type of food TV that's really 75% entertainment and 25% serious messaging, which I was very proud of. I'm so proud of Bizarre Foods. I mean, it was an incredible show. If I'm going to do something now, I want to do, these are serious times. It calls for serious stories, and I think people are up for it. And the ratings response, the viewer response has been through the roof. So clearly we've touched on something. People want to hear stories told a different way. I think it was the same thing with your books and, the radio that you did and all the stuff that you did before the Senate. I just think people hear the podcast now.
I'm doing now.
Podcast. People want to hear their information lots of different ways, and everyone processes information differently. So I think we need lots of voices and lots of mediums.
I think that has been a strength of mine.
Yes.
The thing about now we have this coronavirus, obviously, this crisis. And in a crisis, is the most important thing that a president has is his credibility.
Yes. The idea that despite all of the insane, school shootings, you're really big issues in our country that needed to be addressed where we needed leadership, that sort of giant-sized, you can't escape it crisis, you can't sweep it under the rug. It's there for everyone to see. It's going to be affecting every American in every town, everywhere across this country ultimately. And this pandemic, soon to be called pandemic, maybe by the time this is aired, it will officially be called a pandemic. I don't think it officially is yet.
Well, let's knock on wood, we think.
Well, with Mike Pence at the tiller, I'm really, we got 75. We're the richest country, the most sophisticated culture in the history of civilization, and we've got 75,000 kits that, by the way, don't even detect the virus in its early stages. So you could use the kit. It can give you a clean bill of health on day 2 or 3, but you got to do the test again on day 6 and 7. I think he the first 3 years, he walked between raindrops in more ways than one, and I'm hoping that some of this stuff we're going through, that people have to die.
No, we're
the attention to be getting.
We're rooting for Trump to be right.
Yes,
but it's I'm skeptical that that'll be the case.
Yes, sadly, he's.
The latest thing was that people who have it are just relaxing.
Yeah,
some going home, some going to work.
Yeah.
And it's just fine.
And today it's going to be better because they're going to be not traveling and spending their money in America.
Yeah,
that one just got today, and you're getting because thanks to our smartphones, you have people transmitting on YouTube what it's like to be self quarantining in your own house. This is a horror show. It's a horror show.
Yeah.
So
let's.
But we wish him well in all his future endeavors.
No, I'm just saying I hope that this thing isn't as bad as it looks like it could be.
Yeah. You had a cooking question? A food question?
Yes. Here is my question. This is completely no, it's on topic. It's about food. I'm a pretty good cook. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. But I have a very limited repertoire.
Yep.
And
like most good home cooks.
Yeah.
Because you end up cooking the 10, 12, 14 things that you're good at regularly.
Yeah. It's not even 10, 12, 14. It's 2, 4, 6, something like that.
Okay, that's great. That's fine.
And those things I make great.
Yeah.
But how do I expand that?
Really easy. It's
what's the best way
work
to do
that nobody is willing to do. And I always use the golf course metaphor. I have friends that are really lousy golf players. So during the off season, they go to the range once a week, usually on weekends. They have a putting green in the house, and they'll putt 50 balls a night just to keep the swing going so they don't have to work out any bad habits once the weather warms up, and they head out onto the course where they try to play several times a week. So I have lots of people, and these are people who say, I love golf. What's your big hobby? Golf is my big thing. I work during the day. I've got my kids. I do all this kind of stuff, but my thing is golf. So I have lots of folks say to me, same thing. I've got my kids, I've got this, but my thing is cooking. I love cooking. Cooking is my favorite hobby. It's what I want to do. It's my yoga on Sundays. I love cooking. And I say, that's fantastic. And they all say the same thing to me. So what do I need to do to just to get to that, whatever that next level is? And I say, you have to cook something that you've never cooked before twice a week. That's, you look in magazines, look online, just to get a recipe and cook something you've never cooked before. Now, yes, you're going to be going back and forth, looking at the piece of paper or looking at your phone or your iPad, whatever it is. Yes, it's going to take, you're going to, is that 2 onions? Is that 2 cups of onions? And you're going to be slow to put it out the first time. right?
I got
And
it.
it may not turn out 100% the first
It's okay.
time.
It's
But if
okay.
you do it a second time, you'll be much faster at it. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to work out great. And if you choose food that you like to eat, for example, if you like Thai food, get a good Thai recipe online. There's tons of them, right? We have amazing recipes, thousands at andrewzimmern.com. And
that's andrewzimmern.com.
Yes.
Okay.
Tons of recipes. And then here's the other thing. The biggest problem with home cooks is speed. Every time I go to a friend's house and I'm making like coq au vin, chicken braised in red wine with some carrots and onions and some garlic and some herbs, super simple. The oven does 90% of the work. Brown the chicken, pour in the one, sweat your vegetables, add them, throw in a bouquet garni, throw it in the oven for 90 minutes. It comes out, pull the chicken, reduce the sauce for 10 minutes, put the chicken back in the pot and serve it. I mean, it doesn't get any easier.
Okay, reduce.
But the reason people don't make it is because I've got to cut 4 carrots and 2 ribs of celery and 2 onions. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? They're like, oh my God, that takes me half an hour. So again, it's like putting. I tell people all the time, carrots are not expensive, onions are not expensive, and they freeze, and you can use them to make soup at the end of the week. Cut 3 carrots into dice and
I love
matchsticks.
I love cutting vegetables.
Yeah, speed up
I make
your
a
knife
lot of
skills.
salads.
Yeah, speed up work on your knife skills. That's the big thing that people don't do. If you are a savory cook, and yes, pastry chefs, please don't send me angry letters. I know you use knives as well and cut things. But if you are focused primarily on savory cooking and not desserts, you need to speed up your knife work because it makes the cooking time go by
Which
3
means
times
you
as
need
fast.
sharp knives.
And you have to practice it. So just practice. Cut some onions and carrots, and then at the end of the week, take them out of the freezer, saute them, add some broth, puree it, and you have a lovely carrot soup. But within 2-3 weeks, you will be so much faster with your knife. If you do those 2 things, cook new foods twice a week, and practice your knife skills, you will jump 3 or 4 levels ahead in your culinary skill. If you want to jump 5 levels ahead, you'll go to andrewzimmern.com and watch my how-to videos. Do you like that shameless plug?
I asked you.
You know it was decent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wasn't bad.
Okay, that was a good question, though,
It was
wasn't
a great question because I think most people who love to cook don't ask that question. How do I get better? I find in my own life I have to ask. Asking for help is a sign of strength, not of weakness. And I have to remind myself of that all the time. Here's the thing. Food touches all of our lives. Food is the cultural totem that defines us. Math is great, but if you try to steal someone's quadratic equation, they will let you have it. Music, if someone tries to steal my favorite mixtape from college, I'm going to punch him in the face, but I'm not going to get that upset. You take away rice, you take away bread, that is the stuff that revolution is made of when you look back through human history. Food is something that we swim in daily for those of us, because there are 2 food Americas now, haves and have-nots. We have a significant portion of the population that does not eat, is not eating, does not know where their next meals are coming from. And there are 2 food Americas. And it is, I think, incumbent upon us to not pull the wool over people's eyes, in those centerfolds of food magazines that show the $10 million house in Nantucket and the table just breaking under the weight of all the steamers and lobster and corn cobs and kids playing. And, we're getting away from that, thank goodness. But we are leaving people behind. Eating well in America has become a class privilege. That is a serious, serious problem because it is the stuff. Hunger is something that just may undo us. And so food, no matter how we talk about it, whether we joke about it, whether we tell stories about our kids, whether we tell stories about serious issues like we do on What's Eating America, food is the stuff that defines us, and breaking bread with other people helps us understand the other side, which is something that we need to do in this country more and more.
My daughter is a chef. She went to French Culinary Institute. She taught 3rd grade right out of college in the Bronx for 3 years. And then she went to culinary school. And instead of becoming a sous chef in a restaurant or something like that, she taught kids how to cook.
Yeah.
And
so important. And thankfully, there are jobs like that available. You don't have to go into the restaurant business.
And the importance of that was she saw how her kids ate.
Yeah.
And for too many kids, dinner is a hot dog and a Coke.
Yeah.
And so...
Or a package of peanut butter cheese crackers and a Coke.
Yeah.
because that's what you can buy at the Dollar General store that is replacing all the supermarkets in America. I mean,
Right.
small town supermarkets are disappearing. We covered this in our health and food episode, at an astonishing rate, and they're disappearing identically,
Food deserts.
map overlay to places where Dollar General stores move into town. Yeah, it's epically horrible.
Well, everybody, eat well,
Yes.
eat healthy.
Help your neighbor eat well.
Exactly. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening. That beautiful music is by Leo Kottke, the great Leo Kottke. I want to thank Peter Ogburn for producing this podcast. We'll talk again next week.